Today we will be interviewing Joe Keating on home life.
So, could you tell me about your family and parents?
My father came from Kilcommon, Clare, between Clare and Tubbert, Daniel Keating. And my mother lived in the house. She was born and reared here in Downey as well. It's only, as you throw a stone, about 500 metres across country here. We're very close to Grange.
So what are your earliest memories of home life?
My earliest memories of growing up in Downey as well, we were all, I was the second, which probably come to that place, was second in the family. My sister was the eldest, and my parents, they were hard working, nothing too easy about it in those days. But to me, I seem to enjoy my young days growing up.
How many brothers and sisters did you have, and where are they now?
I had one sister and 3 brothers. My sister married in 1960 down to a member named Eddie O'Regan down in Kilmeaden in County Waterford. And she had 4 family there, but she died of a brain tumour in 1991. And the brothers then, Jimmy was next to me. He lived in Clonmel. He had a shop in Clonmel. He is not going anymore now. Nelson Park is closed down. And Babs then was all, mainly he went to school here and in Clonmel to high school, and he played hurling and football, and he played for Tipperary. Donny then, he was the youngest of the family. He lived in Clare. He married and lived in Clare. He had a garage there and that, and that's mainly the family now.
And what do you remember about your grandparents?
What I remember about the grandparents? My grandmother, she lived, that's my mother's mother. She lived at home in the house with us, and she used to go to Clonmel every Friday on the bus from Tom Keating's Cross, and that was her day out. And she used to keep a few hens, and she's reared turkeys, and that my mother didn't put in or out now, and she always did that. And up to the time she died, she was unfortunate. She actually slipped on the road one day going up to the shop, Heffernan's shop, and she broke her hip, and she never really recovered her. She died 2 years later in 1951. She was about 70, I think, at the time, which would be considered young today, like 100. But my grandfather, Joss Mack, died at a young age. My mother was being confirmed here in Grange, and my father was brought to the chapel the day after. My grandfather, Joss Mack, was brought to the chapel the day after.
That's an unusual combination, yeah.
She was 12 years of age when her father died. And from my father's side, my grandparents, I used to go on holidays, summer holidays, to my grandmother, and it was a very similar situation. My grandfather, from my father's side, died at a young age, at the age of 51. So that was it. As I said, every year I went to holiday school from school to Kilcommon with my grandmother, and I was great company for her, like, because she was there on her own, like, you know. Well, the men used to be out working, that kind of thing, you know.
What can you tell me about your home district or area?
What kind of farm? You know?
About your home?
Darney's Well now would be your home area. So anything about Darney's Well or your home area? Yeah.
Yeah. It was an attached house. The kitchen, sitting room, 3 bedrooms, and in those days there was no tiles or anything in the house. There was no ESP. There was no there was no telephone. No radio. The only people that had a radio, they lived over across the field from us in Darney's Well. The wires. And we used to go across there, I can remember, in the nights, my mother used to bring it over, which that was adjacent to the well where we got our water for the house. And we, particularly of a Saturday night, I can remember, there was a program on the radio, Round the Fire, and some of the great characters, Rose Brennan and Joe Lynch, they were very good singers in those days. And that program went on, it was an hour long of a Saturday night on the radio. And I actually went to another house, Hogan's in Darney's Well. They lived over close to the well also. In 1947 to hear the All-Ireland football final from New York. And as I say, we had no radio then. And I can always remember being up the road that time in Grange, a crowd of lads around the night. I'm going back, I'm further on the year now, in 1960, the Clancy's were on television from New York, from Carnegie Hall in New York. And everyone was talking all the week, oh, the Clancy's are on television. And nobody had a television around, only Mr. Mulkey, the schoolmaster. But he was a hard man to approach. None of the lads would go near him anyway. And it was left to me to go up and ask, could we watch the Clancy's in New York? So I knocked at the door, and he comes out and said, what do you want? That was the type of his approach. I said, the Clancy's are on television from New York. We're very anxious to watch it. Who are they? I had to tell him anyway, they were from Carrick-on-Shore. They're great singers and that. So he left us in anyhow. I think there was about 4 or 5. So we watched the program anyway. He had no interest in himself until he was a great Irish speaker, man. And this song came on our phone, an Irish song, and he straightened himself up. He used to give a pull to the tie like that, and he was all about it then.
He loved the Irish language,
yeah,
he did.
Yeah. But that was just one of the things, like in those days when no one else had a television around. It was something else, like, wasn't it?
It was a treat, yeah. Who else was with you that night? Do you remember who else went in watching it?
I'd say it would have been John James now.
John James Lonergan.
Maybe the Moores. And
yeah. Mickey Moore,
a
yeah.
few like that. Pat Cleary, well, he died in Australia a few years ago. And maybe John Keating and Vinnie and a few of them, you know.
Yeah.
But years afterwards, I actually got a job to collect an animal from Paddy Clancy down in Carrick-on-Shore. He was farming there, and he gave me a run down the whole lot. I got the evening there, and it was very interesting. Tell me about when they appeared on stage and the way they were trained, that they had to keep the crowd going the whole time, that they couldn't lapse for 1 second. That was most important, he said. And he showed me in his sitting room this sweater, Aaron's sweater, this woman knitted with a picture of the Clancy's on it. Yeah.
Roughly how many families were in your area?
In Dorney as well. Back then there was 3 families. There was ourselves, Keatings, there was the Wires and Hogans. Now, the Wires and Hogans, which I mentioned earlier, they're very close to well, the townsland is called after Dorney as well. And they lived very close to the well. And if you went back further, there were, I think in all, there was about 5 families in the vicinity of the well. And you can see, like, the reason why in those days the well was nearly more important than what a pub is today. Water, they had water. Actually, the well was the only source of water for miles around. There was an old pump up the road here in Morrissey's, but that pump only held for a couple of weeks of the year, or maybe a couple of months. It went dry. And Dorney's well was the only place the drinking water or the water for the house, and it was very, it was a gift for us. Like,
And how old was it? Do you know the well? How long?
The well.
It goes back hundreds of years, I suppose.
Probably. I asked Jimmy Hogan. He was the eldest man in the area. At one stage, he was inside in the old folks' house in Clonmel. He was 95 when he died, and I asked him about it, and he said the field where the well was, Dorney's, they wanted the field where the well was. And he reckoned that the well was about 350 years old. Back maybe, at that time now, I say, somehow around the 16th century.
Right, so that brings it back a lot of years.
Yeah.
And what were the houses like? Were they mostly thatched houses?
Yeah, in Dorney's well, the 3 houses that, and I can remember, were thatched. And you had Sweeney's over the road from us. It was a thatched house. It was straight across now from where Alice Halley's, that was a thatched house. But it was rebuilt. They built a house later, and it was. But when I can remember, it was a thatched house. There were a good few thatched houses. John James is down below, attached, and the old house. Not attached.
There's no thatched house left now, sure.
No.
No.
What are the main changes you've seen in your area over the years?
What was the main?
The main changes in your area?
Well, I'd say my generation have seen all the big changes. When I go back to my young days, there was no such thing as a tractor, apart from maybe a steam engine or a contractor for the thrashing. They had a tractor to drive the mill. There was no cars. In the mid-40s, there were no cars on the road because of the war. The war started in 1939 and finished in 1945, and it took a few years before cars came on the road then again, didn't it? Life was completely different. I ploughed with a pair of horses at 11 years of age, and as I say, I've seen all the big changes. Then the horses and the tractor came along in the 50s, and like things improved a lot, from the earlier years, that there was virtually everything was done by hand. Compared to today, like there's an awful change.
Like you told about Dorney as well, are there any other places like that what the the history of the name or anything?
All I can tell you about here, where this school is now, in the olden days in Dunamores, this is park. This area is still park, and all that area was a deer park in Dunamores time, back in the early the 16th, 17th century.
All deers around this here where the school is.
Yeah, that's why it's called park.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what games and pastimes did you play at home?
Well, it was mainly hurling and football, and we played when we were going to school. We played up on the road here, outside the church. Up and down the road, there was no playground, and we had a game. This game used to start between Nicholastown and Clofty, because a lot of the school children that time were from Clofty, and that's why there were two teams, and the Keatings and Nicholastown, and there were a good few from Nicholastown, and it was Nicholastown and Clofty. It used to be hard going, like there was during the school break, and in the evening, and we used to play handball up against the church wall. The wall was high then at this side of the main gate, and skittles on the road. You mark small skittles, no skittles, and you get the one that's in that you throw it and knock them out, and you stand back and they mark the ground. And you know, it was an interesting game enough. Like,
Were there different games boys played and girls played?
the girls used to go into the churchyard, and I never noticed though what type of games they played, but all the girls went into the churchyard during when I'm going back to the old school now, Tom, and there were nowhere else to go into the churchyard, and we played hurling on the road. You know, all the girls went into the churchyard, and they had their lunch there and that kind of thing.
They play hide and go seek, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. And well, there was games that you used to play there. Was well, like it wouldn't be played there now, but a paper chase, where you left a bit of paper, you went off across the fields, and 2 or 3, and you followed the paper chase. Did you ever hear of that?
No, that's new now, yeah. It kept you busy.
Yeah.
And were there any games that like boys and girls played together?
They used to play around us, of course, yeah. But you know the ball and just strike the ball like with the bat. But not so much in those days now, where boys and girls got together. They mostly they all had their different games. They used associate very much, as far as I can remember now, you know.
And tell me about card games. Were there any of those played?
About
Card games?
card games, yeah. Yeah, well, our house at home was a great game place for the cards. And John Fielding's father now used to play there, Bobby Woodham and Ted Hayden, and good few more around. There was always games of cards there, particularly coming up to Christmas. And they often went on till 5 or 6 in the morning.
Would there be prizes or money or?
Oh, they might be playing for a turkey or a ham or something like that. Well, turkeys mainly, and they used to tell a good one. And this happened for a fact. Going back years ago, in my grandmother's time, they had this game of cards coming up to Christmas, And Tommy O'Connor, he'd be an uncle of Pat's now. He was a bit of a bow guy, and they were watching the table anyway when it was coming up to see how the game was going. And Mr. Mulkey, the schoolmaster anyway, looked certain to win the turkey. And the boys went out and they took the turkey out of the shed, and there was no turkey. He was like a lightning devil.
He wasn't too pleased.
Yeah.
Did he ever get a turkey?
They took the turkey,
Yeah.
and they would know whether they get back to. So what he didn't say to my grandmother, like, no turkey after winning the turkey.
Yeah. They sorted it out.
They probably sorted it out after.
Was there any cheating in games?
Cheating, yes, there was. They used to drop cards and things like that, you know.
What do you mean drop a card now? What, because the boys and girls wouldn't understand that.
If we just say, for instance, that a game of cards going on, and you had it came to it, you had great cards, and you looked certain to win the game, and somebody said, "Oh, I have only 4 cards." Next thing they have to deal the cards again.
And they'd have dropped a card on the ground. All right.
Involved in any clubs growing up, like hurling clubs or football?
Oh, we did, yeah. Daddy Bacon, Grange, and Abfin, and we had a bit of success from time to time. Particularly, I didn't ever play much football because I didn't really have the time, because my father wasn't in great health, and I had to give most of my time at home, you know.
Did any other family members have notable sporting successes?
Sporting success. Any other family members?
Oh, yeah.
Babs and.
Other than Babs?
Well, Babs as well.
Babs, yeah. Yeah, he was about the only one that had success really. He played for the county in both football and hurling, and won 3 All-Irelands medals. He got a good few awards as well as that.
Can you tell us about that award
Yes.
that he won? The picture here.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that award then?
Or the
Texaco, yes.
Texaco Award, yeah. He won the Texaco Award. I think that was 1964, wasn't it?
It was, I think. It's 1972, it says here.
Oh, 72.
So Christy Ring with his former team. No, that was Christy Ring, sorry, yes.
Yes, yeah. He won the All-Ireland in 71. And
72 then, I think he won it.
yeah, well, that would have been
The award, yeah.
yeah. But he won the Railway Cup football the same year, 1972, with Munster. And Mick O'Connell and all those lads, Mick Dwyer, he was the only Tipperary man.
So he played football to Munster level and hurling at Munster level. This photograph here, when he's in his bare feet, there's a story behind that. Can you tell us about it? Yes.
He bought a new pair of boots the week before the All-Ireland, and they were putting his feet, his toes. He had one of them in particular, so he couldn't throw off one without throwing off the two. There was about 10 minutes left, and he couldn't bear the boots any longer, so he had to throw them off and played in his bare feet. He couldn't even bear the stockings because all his toes were cut. I think he got a belt across the feet sometime in the second half from Tad Dillon, I think, or something like that. But that was why he had to take off the boots anyhow. He played on They won the All-Ireland.
They did. That was my first All-Ireland.
It was.
1971. I was behind the goal watching Peter O'Sullivan from
Yeah.
Cashel, because I was from Cashel myself, and he was the goalie at the time. So I have great memories of that, and I saw him playing in his bare feet.
Yeah.
So it's most unusual. I'd say he's one of the few times anybody ever played in All-Ireland in their bare feet. I'd say.
Yeah.
And there's one other photograph here with a man with a hat, a famous man,
Oh, Christy.
Christy Ring. Can you tell us a bit about Christy Ring, because the boys and girls wouldn't know about him, I'd say.
Christy Ring played, he was, I suppose, classed as one of the best in the game. He played for 20 years, I think. He made a shoot he did. And he was definitely a genius. And he won, I suppose, 4 or 5 All-Irelands, I think, during that period.
He's regarded as one of the best hurlers ever, the most skillful hurlers ever. Yeah.
So, what type of food did you have for breakfast or dinner or supper?
We normally had porridge for breakfast, and for dinner, when we were going to school here in Grange, just up the road, we always came home for our lunch. Just so handy down the road, it's only a short distance, and my mother used to have potatoes for us at lunchtime. And mainly that was the food, and she used to bake bread, because bread was very scarce in those days. And you know, she used to bake cakes of bread herself. And there was very little bought from the shops then. It was nearly all self-sufficient, like, you know, the milk and the cows and all the so far, and that was it, like, you know.
And where did your family get your food? Did you like buy it, or did you grow your own food?
Yeah, they grow. My father used to grow potatoes and vegetables and that kind of thing. And I think he probably come into this one anyhow, about they used to kill a pig every year. There was a man, Morris Halley's father, used to kill the pig, and there was 3 or 4 families used to group in this pig. We'd kill a pig, and for instance, how they used to do it, they used to make the puddings of the blood and so forth, and all the little bits and pieces they put into them, and they divide up the puddings amongst the neighbours. And there was about 4 families, like they'd kill a pig each year, and that was it. There was how they used to preserve the meat, and when they killed the pig, they'd cut up the meat and the bacon, and they put salt it and put it into a stand, and after 2 or 3 months they take it out and hang it up in the chimney to be smoked. And there was no fridges, no nothing in those days, because there was no electricity.
And was every part of the animal used?
Yeah, even the head. They used to boil the half heads and the pig, so forth. Yeah.
And were there like special foods for like Christmas and Lent and Easter?
Not so much different from today nowadays. I'd say in our home anyway, it was a turkey. Now some people used to have a goose, but it was mainly similar to today, like, you know, they had their own turkeys and chicken and so forth, and it was always nearly always a turkey in our case anyway.
Was there any shortages of food during the war?
But it was tea and bread and butter also. Tea was nearly impossible to come on. People used to have to buy it at the black market, and they'd be so anxious, delighted to get it, they'd pay any money for it. You know, that was the way it was, like, it was scarce during the war. There wasn't the same amount of food available like today, because they hadn't the same type of machinery to sow the crop or grow the crop in big volumes like today, you know.
When you say black market now, what was the black market? Would that be through the shops, or would that be by buying someplace else? How would you get on the black market?
The black market, I know there was my uncle knew some fellow was in the army in Clonmel, because he was in the Air Force himself, and this fellow used to get it for I think he was in the officer's mess or something, and he used to sell it in the black market. You would pay twice as much, 3 times the price for the tea.
Was that your uncle that got the tea for you?
No.
No. That was a different uncle, was it?
A different man.
And tell us just a small bit about him, because he was in the army. You mentioned you had relations in the army.
He was all through the war, and he was taken prisoner of war in Germany 6 weeks before the war ended, and he was in Belsen camp in Germany.
Right.
And he was released after the war. But he came home here in 1947, and he was at home for about 3 weeks, and he was shell-shocked and everything after the war. He was never the same. But he went back again, and I never saw him after.
What was his name?
Paddy McNamara.
Paddy McNamara.
Yeah.
In the British Army.
Yeah. He was in the Irish Guards.
The Irish Guards.
Yeah.
And was there a difference between the food rich people and poor people had?
I'd say that, you know, there was. Some people, back in those days, there were a lot of poor people. I mean, there are poor people there today, but there were a lot poor then, because there were probably not the same social welfare available in those days. And that's like I told you, Tom, about the school. They weren't able to go to school because they didn't have food. And that was exactly the point now, you know, that
you mentioned a family that you used to send out to visit houses, did you?
2 or 3 different families. We used to send out in bicycles to know why they weren't going to school. And the mother said in one case that they had no food this morning, so they weren't able to get out of bed. And that was exactly true. And then, you know, like if you hadn't food, like you wouldn't be able for much. Like, you know.
So, what was farming like when your grandparents and your parents did it?
Oh, it was very primitive things in those days. As I said, there was very everything was manual. There was very little the machinery compared with today. For instance, sowing the corn, when I can remember when I was very small, they used to shake it by hand, and there was what are known as a 4-sod plough. There were small little ploughs, and they cover in the grain. And some of the farmers had a fiddle. Actually, Mick Moore above has that fiddle for shaking the seeds. still, where they spread the grass seeds, shaped the grass seeds and the grain. They spread the grain. Then the corn drill came along. I said the corn drill didn't come along till sometime in the early 50s. And that was a big help to sow the corn. And it speeds up the job. Like, for instance, there was a song made up about a corn drill. Bill Luby, I think, was the very first man to buy a corn drill around here. He lived up in Corrigan, and they made up a song about it. Bill Luby's corn drill.
I heard about it, Sam.
You did?
Do you know any bit of it, or do you know any of the words of it?
I wouldn't be good, I wouldn't no,
Yeah.
not very much. But they started like this. Bill Luby, being a gentleman, he bought a corn drill. And a few bits and pieces, and some fella took away the corn drill this day, and there was a man running up Macloughy Hill shouting at him, "Bring back Bill Luby's corn drill."
So there was a bit of fun in the song.
Yeah.
Who wrote the song, do you know?
It's a man by the name of Morris Lonergan. He worked down at Cummins in Macloughy. He was a great character. He wrote a lot of songs and poems. He was a brother of Johnny Lonergan, if you remember, in Newcastle. He died there. He was a good character too. Morris Lonergan. He wrote a few songs that related to Newcastle, about John Nugent's pole, and somebody took John Nugent's pole and he made up a song, but he was quite good. Yeah. I can remember the man now, but it was a good while back, because I was very small at the time.
What was the trashing day?
Well, the thrashing, yeah. That was a great occasion. People, you know, particularly when, in my age, era, they'd be looking forward to it for weeks. You'd be able to stay at home from school for the thrashing. And it was a great day. Also, there used to be a great night after the thrashing. They'd have a sing-song and a dance. And there's some great characters come along and sing songs. Actually, Michael O'Byrne used to sing a song, Blow It Out Thrashing. He was great. He come along, and there was another man, Billy O'Donnell, down in Gowan Temple. I think he used to follow the engine for Ted O'Donnell. He was a good old singer. He used to sing. I can still recall to this day. He used to sing "The Valley of Knockanua."
Right. What you used to sing yourself?
I used to sing the road by the river that flows through Raheen.
Do you want to sing a bit of it?
I have walked along Broadway, I've been down the Strand, and I've seen the big highways in many a land, but of all the big cities, the light I've not seen are the road by the river that flows through Raheen. I would sit by my window whenever it would rain, with my little pug nose flattened up neath the pane, sadly watching the rain as it made a little stream down the road by the river that flows through Raheen.
Very good.
The combines now came in the late 50s, and of course there was a big difference. Like, the thrashings gradually faded out. the threshing, an awful lot of people didn't like to see the threshings go on because, you know, it was part of life in those days. But when the combine came along, a lot of people asked it wouldn't be a success, but it gradually took over, and then they got bigger and better as the years went on. The small combines in those days now, you'd be lucky to cut 4 or 5 acres in a day, and now they can cut 50 or 60 acres in a day. You know, they have advanced so much in technology and that. But the machines in those days, the combine was a great thing really, I suppose, for, you know, it took a lot of the work out of, there was an awful lot employed in the farm back then. Everything had to be done by hand, and every whole thing there was, you know, where there's only one man today, there was 4 or 5 men.
You fixed your own machines, didn't you?
Well, you do
repair them.
a fair bit anyway.
Yeah.
So, where were the local fairs held?
The local fairs were held once a month, one in Cale and one in Clonmel. There was about a fortnight between them, and you had to walk the cattle to the fair, and it wasn't a very nice job because one person had to go in front of them for fear they'd go in over a fence, and which usually used to happen. There was one particular place if you went to Marlfield Road, it was known as the Ha-Ha. It was a deep drain along, and the cattle just go down into that, and the next thing they could go into the fields there, and you'd have a job in getting them out of it. That was the one most awkward place. But anyhow, the fairs itself, you'd have to stand the cattle inside the street, and the buyers would come along and they'd look at them and they'd bid you a bad price and they'd go away again. And this other fella then he'd come along and he'd say, why didn't you sell the cattle to that man? And this fella would be a jobber, like, and he'd kind of go hard on you to sell the animals. To finish up, when you sold the animals, then you took the price, or whatever price was going on the day, and if there was no better price going, rather than bring him home again, you know.
And what exactly was a jobber?
The jobber was a guy, he was set up like to buy the cattle for some of the big lads that were exporting or whatever. And he'd come along and he'd bid you, as I say, he'd bid you a bad price, and he'd come back again, he'd keep bantering with you to get you down to as low a price as he could for the person that was going to buy him, like, you know. They demand look money then when you had when they were paying you. For instance, if they gave you, we say you got £50 each for the cattle, or say you sold 10 cattle, 500. If I don't think to make anything like that in those days, but they'd want as much as they could look money back over it. They might be looking for 50 or €30 or £30 then. But they'd be bent on all that as well, like, you know. It was kind of
And if you didn't give the luck money, what would they think about it?
Oh, they wouldn't settle. They wouldn't know. And then you would have to, if the cattle were going for export or whatever, you'd have to drive the cattle to the station, you know, or they'd be going by train, you know, whatever, from Clonmel or Clare. But the guesses there I ever down, I was only young, Tom Morrissey, he lived up the road here, Joe Morrissey's uncle. He asked me to give him a hand bringing sheep into the fair in Clare. It was a terrible painful, slow job bringing sheep from here into Care. You give hours on end, never time to bring in sheep into Care. So anyway, I got into the fair and he left me look after the sheep. They're outside an old Fitzgerald's, I can remember well. And he went off to the fair to find out how much the sheep were making. Serious man. So when he came back, all the sheep were out, and this crowd came along with a road of sheep, and they drove all the sheep in front of them off down through the middle of the fair. There was I, and off down to no sheep, they were all gone, all over the place. Tom, I got some eating there, and so I was only about 12 or 13 at the time, trying to mind it.
And how did you sort it out?
I took hours on end to sort it. Well, of course, he had marked all right, with rifles to sort it out. It took ages. I'll never forget that, the reading I got, and I could do nothing about it, you know.
No way.
Where did you go to primary school?
Grange, where the old school now is now the hall. My first day in school was the 12th of April 1943. I was about 4 years and 8 months. I got to in August. Born in 1938, 14th of August. And I can remember well, I said it earlier to Tom, my first day in school, and there was a woman, a girl, she looked after me for about 3 days. She was Mary Kelly. She's Mrs. Sullivan in the Wood Road. How I remember how the girls used to play in the graveyard was that she brought me around the graveyard that particular day. But there were just in the school, there was only the 2 classrooms. There was a divide in the centre, there was a wall in the centre of the hall, and the baby's first and second class was the nearest to the church, to the small gate. The third, fourth and fifth and sixth then was nearer to the shop, they would say the Frank Hewlett's now.
Who were your teachers and what do you remember?
My teacher was Miss Carrigan. She was from down Old Grange on the main road below, near where Mr. Slattery is living now.
Had you copybooks and things, or writing? What kind of desks had you?
A copybook, and we had an Irish and English book and geography. That was mainly it. Then a lot of the pupils used to copy from one another. So like Michael Heffron tells a good one about, I don't know, I don't claim to being that good in school, but he said there was a girl lived across the road. She used to copy my homework. She was Frances Darcy, and she was after copying it anyway, and she signed my name and that. Michael Heffron tells that
Yes,
day on the book.
How was the school heated?
Turf and coal and timber, and where the firewood was kept it is known as the stable in the church grounds above. In there it was where the stable for the horses, for the priests. In the older times when there was no transport, that's where they kept the firewood for the school and the church. But we were sent out there for for the turf or the coal to bring it in for the school, the 2 fires.
And you go to Darnley as well for the water, is it?
We did.
Yeah. That was a nice job to get. You'd be gone. How long would you be gone going to Darnley as well and back for water?
Be gone about 2.5 hours across the fields.
Yeah.
You get 2 buckets. Just to be during the summer or the warm weather when children needed the water in the school and there was no other source. Each person got a bucket to go to the well for the water. And the well, I suppose, was a good mile away. And going back to more, by the time you get back, you'd have half was spilled. You know.
And what kind of toilets did you have at school?
Oh, there was only, they were very primitive in those days, just an ordinary bucket. And the senior pupils got the job of emptying them out in Callaghan's field.
A tough job.
Yeah.
So dry toilets kind of are just buckets.
Yeah. And the girls' toilet, the girls had to go all around. It was in close to Frank Hughes's there. It was actually built out on where Frank Hughes is now, the girls' toilet, and the boys' toilet. You come in from the roadside. There was a mall actually that came out in front of the school, and the toilets were in there. It was out of Woodbridge now, out about probably 3 or 4 meters out on the road where you went into the toilet.
What was the discipline policy at the time?
I'd say it was kind of rough now. Miss Callaghan, she had a drumstick. And if you weren't speaking up, she'd put the drumstick into your mouth that way and she'd let you see what you wanted. And she'd slap you with the drumstick. And I remember Mr. Mulcahy, he had a nice fine stick as well. You get it across the hand. And what a regular one of his, he'd hit you down the head with the roll book.
You would feel that.
Yeah, you would. And there was about 70 on the roll book at that time. But one thing, they were always shocked. I'd say if there were 60 came to school, you know.
At that time,
yeah. But of course you can see, we're probably getting to this anyhow, how they got to school.
Yeah. You walked though, didn't you?
Oh, actually,
yeah, it was easy for you, but for others now it was tough to get to school, yeah.
You were talking about over 3 miles, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Easy,
From how far away now? What kind of places were they coming from to the school? That would be what would be the farthest away places?
The farthest away now would be, as I say, Roxborough, down where Keating's very big.
What subjects did you do in school?
Irish, English, maths, and geography.
Some history, I suppose.
History, yeah.
Did you have PE, we'll say, or did you have exercise? You know, was that? No, you didn't have any games or PE built into it.
Well, it wasn't always Mr. Workey, but somebody said to a man in the parish anyway about Mr. Murphy, not missing the many. Somebody said, you know, about what Mr. Mulcahy like. So what did he ever do for he had no interest in sport, he had no interest in this, and you know, that was exactly, he hadn't really, you know.
But he was a very knowledgeable man in his own right though, wasn't he? Very interested in the Irish, and
yeah,
he wrote books and things, didn't he?
He wrote a book
on Glaunagus or Revan.
He did.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling us about the Just up the road here in John Carrigan's, where the old house is, I often wondered why the windows were closed up in the house. There was a man shot there, Tom Berry, by the White Boys. And the murder was planned down in Pat Keating, we'll say Tom Keating's field here now. The murder was planned by the White Boys. And the field is known as the Pork and Horse.
And Jim, Mr. Mulcahy told you about that murder, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, those windows are still blocked up, it's still there.
Yeah.
It's all blocked up now, and John Carrigan, because that's where the murder took place. Yeah.
And his wife had a small child, and she held the child on her arms, told us all this, and she pleaded with him not to shoot him. They shot.
Have you any examples of stories told by your parents or grandparents?
Yeah, they used to tell us about people that in that age used to call to the house, like for instance that neighbours, they call in, tell stories, what is known as courtiert in those days. There was every night of the week, and I remember from a very young age, Ted Hayden, Mike Sweeney, he lived over the road, and Paddy Carrigan below, he had been a brother of Miss Carrigan, the teacher, and they used to be in our house every night of the week, telling stories about this thing and that thing, and telling ghost stories, in fact, about some person meeting a woman with a white sheet over her head and all this kind of thing. They frightened the daylights out of you, you know. And that was the difference. Like I suppose today, everybody had to make their own fun, hadn't they?
They had, yeah.
You know.
Who else was good to tell stories in the area or sing songs? Who else would be good entertainers or the characters? And Ted Hayden was one anyway, sure, he was a character.
Yeah.
What do you remember about Ted?
Ted was a guest man. He was, you know, like he'd spend the most of his time up at the shop, and he'd, you know, he was able to converse on everything that went on around the place. He was a real old character in his time, you know. And Mike Sweeney was another character. He used to read a lot, and he could tell you all about Columkill's prophecy and all that. And one thing I can always remember about him, that he said in Columkill's prophecy, Clonmiltown would reach Malfield and at one side and Kilsheelan on the other.
Yeah,
and it's nearly there.
It's nearly there for Malfield. The event is coming closer to it.
Yeah, it is.
And so he read a lot about the saints.
Oh,
and
he
things,
did an
yeah.
awful lot.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.